To order at 7 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard. Did you leave?
He may be unmuting.
Absent. Well, I think he was going to leave, actually.
Okay.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Okay, we have a public hearing regarding ordinance 1174. That's page 18 of tonight's packet. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, enacting Cordova Municipal Code, Chapter 5.41, raw fish tax, the implementation of a voter-approved 0.5% tax on the value of raw fish landed in the City of Cordova. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak to this ordinance? If you could just approach the microphone and state your name and residence for the record. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Alexis Cooper. I'm a resident of Cordova at 1006 Whiteshed. I've been a resident for 10 years. I'm also the accounts manager at the small processing facility 60 North Seafoods. And I just wanted to briefly comment on the drafted ordinance. I would like to thank the other processors who were fully engaged much earlier with the application of this ordinance, and also like to ensure that any reporting or records will be done on an annual basis on a total value and reported at that one time per year. March 31st would be in alignment with the state's reporting for the year prior. Additionally, I have a question. Is there an additional $35 fee to register with the city? If so, please remove that because we all buy business licenses. And thirdly, just the 60 North Seafoods is a small processing facility. We're located only in Cordova. The owners chose Cordova to base their operations intentionally to bring business to the community. This 0.5% tax, although it goes to a good cause, will impact us directly on every sale of fish. Other processors have options to land their fish elsewhere. About 7 years ago, when I was seated as the Cordova District Fishermen United Executive Director, there was a discussion to apply a raw fish tax, not for a specific purpose, but to the community. And one of the reasons that moved on is, or was passed on, is because it could drive fish away from the community. Now, in my role with this small business, we don't have anywhere else to go, and we intentionally chose to do business within the city of Cordova. And just thinking that as we try to rush to implement this year, maybe consider a third draft. Open to any questions.
Okay, actually, it's for public comment, and we're short, but I think council has heard your comments on the administrative fees, and it is right now currently drafted to have annual reporting. So, all right, thank you very much.
And the $35.
Yeah. Well, that's an administrative function of the city, so.
Thank you. I will not be staying for the meeting, but thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hannah. Is there additional public comment? Okay, Councilman Allison?
Just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, is this public hearing on substitute ordinance 1174 or original 1174? It's on
The
substitute.
substitute.
It's on the substitute, so it has the exemption.
Just
It
the
includes-
agenda didn't say substitute.
Sorry,
Yeah, okay,
you're right.
sorry. Good point. Yeah, so for clarification, it does include the exemption for hatchery fish and for the annual rather than monthly reporting. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, seeing no other public comment, we just have one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. So Susan, I'm going to.
Let me make sure if we lost Jeff. Did we lose Jeff? He
Councilman
wasn't,
Guard, do we have you online now?
so I'm going to turn off the phone.
Give you a second to unmute.
I feel
Okay,
like he was said.
we thought that he was going to have to leave, so we can go ahead and mute the phones now. And then the city clerk, I'm prepared to excuse you now if that's good timing.
Okay.
We have the high school awards ceremonies going on, so, and Leif has volunteered to clerk for a bit, so. So if our microphone's running, we can call the regular meeting to order.
Yep.
Clay Copeland,
Here?
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kenneth Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard is absent, Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
David Gleason. Here. That's quorum.
Okay, that's great. We'll revert to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the regular agenda.
Move to approve?
Second.
Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. Disclosures of conflict of interest and ex parte communication. I think I'm just going to interject at this time. There was a lot of questions about the CTC land proposal. It's item to M, unfinished business, action on proposal for lots 3 and 4. There's several layers of potential conflict here. One are members of the cooperative, CTC. 5 councilmen are members because of necessity and needing a quorum to vote. That really doesn't constitute a, we have somewhat of an exemption there. Another is spouses of councilmen who are employed or on the board of CTC. And in reviewing the correspondence and assessment by the attorney, analysis by the council, those in this transaction, the compensation or of those employees or spouses are not going to change because of this transaction. And this transaction is also of subsidiary, so there is a bit of a third-party separation. So I do not see a conflict, and I'm not going to declare one for that item. It would be incumbent then on council to find one. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. It's a little complex. So, so that aside, are there any disclosures of conflicts or ex parte communications from councilmen? Okay, seeing none. Communications by and petitions from visitors. We don't have any guest speakers scheduled for tonight, but are there any audience comments regarding agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we have chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. CCMC.
So I'm Kristen Carpenter, here to represent the CCMC board, and you had asked at the session we just had to comment on some of the things that we're doing to try to improve the revenue picture at the medical center, and I can comment on some of these because Scott made some notes. We are changing the electronic clearinghouse that we're using so that we anticipate to improve the revenues that we're capturing from our billing. We have a new business office manager, which is a position that I think hasn't been filled for several years. So there's going to be a lot more help, another full-time person to help with getting bills through the system and capturing charges that have been incurred by services provided. We have a new nurse practitioner coming online, and a special skill that she brings is wound care, which is something that we haven't been able to provide. I mentioned earlier that in the past, we've had to turn away some swing bed patients because we can't provide them the care that they need. And what Scott has told us is that several times these are folks who need very specialized wound care, and they end up having to go to a bigger facility. But the nurse practitioner coming in, that is her area of expertise, and she's going to be able to provide training to other staff at CCMC so we can do that and hopefully be able to accept more swing bed patients. We have a new permanent physical therapist, a new telepsychiatrist. We have Dr. Gifford, who's coming in doing pediatric clinics. He's come once already, and he's coming again May 3rd, and he comes quarterly for pediatric services. And also, just so people know, we have physician coverage scheduled through February of 2020. I know Councilmember Allison probably remembers the years when it was like every 3 weeks we were looking for a provider, and we weren't sure when we were going to, if we were going to have coverage in the next month or so. But anyway, we've got between the physician that we have on staff and folks who have been coming here and have experience with Cordova, we have coverage through February of 2020. So those are all some of the things that we're doing to try to provide medical services to increase the quality and the range of care that we can provide in town. And the other comment I just wanted to make is something that baffles me with the whole PERS situation. And I think you all must be aware of this, but like I said, I am just baffled because the state made an error in PERS, I'm not sure how many years ago, causing this arrears, and they're levying this on municipalities and a handful of hospitals, and we're supposed to make up the gap for all the state employees who are in the retirement system, so everybody from DOT and DNR and Fish and Game and DEC and Department of Commerce, and that's being levied on a really small number of entities trying to pay. And now that Wrangell Hospital has been sold, and that's one fewer payer into the system, and I don't understand why municipalities aren't rising up and going to the legislature and saying, this is a statewide issue. This is not something that a handful of entities can bear. You know, this is and maybe you know more about this than I do, but it's an issue of like, there's just no political will, but it still is just really frustrating.
Yeah, AML is, actually Alan and some others have pulled together the communities that are affected, and AML is kind of starting to carry the torch on this.
I
a little
hope.
bit, so.
I mean, I had heard that a while ago, and then I thought they decided not to, but maybe there's a change of.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't think at this point that there appears to be a lot of political will for it, but the issue is not unnoticed
Yeah.
and it's not unlobbied.
Great.
We continue to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's our report. I'm happy to answer questions,
Any questions, council?
and I'll just keep coming back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
School board.
Good evening. Wanted to share that 4 of us spent 5 days down in Juneau talking to anyone who would listen, not just our legislators, but most of the House Finance Committee, several senators, and we deliberately picked folks who weren't necessarily on our side to share Cordova's story regarding school bond debt reimbursement, education funding, the raw fish tax, municipal revenue sharing, the whole picture, to help them understand how we're functioning as a school district and how our functioning is impacted by the well-being of the city as well. So just like with PERS, the message is getting out there and we are trying to carry it, and the resolution on your agenda this evening is another step in that direction. So certainly know that anything that we can do on the school board to carry forward Cordova's interests, we're doing it and we're willing to do it. It is a little bit of a bleak picture, so I would encourage everyone to not stop. I think that the message we got from every legislator we spoke to was that they were needing to hear individual voices, not just lobbyists, not just big organizations. They wanted to hear from individual citizens. They wanted to be able to tally all those comments. So I think, several of them asked us to bring that message back to our community. So if you can help share that message as well, that would be important. 2-line emails is sufficient, they said, but they need something. So on a happier note, our athletic awards are happening this evening, and a lot of celebrations are being had. Also, we have 21 musicians going to state on both, mostly individual recognition and competition. So that's pretty exciting. I think the other thing I wanted to share was if you have any questions about the resolution that's in front of you, happy to answer those. Not to put pressure on anyone, we offered it as a joint opportunity. We're happy to carry that forward on our own, but we thought that it would be much stronger with all of our voices on it. And certainly if there's any edits that we need to make. And graduation is 3 weeks away.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, I guess on the comments, is it, I mean, do they want to hear, yes, I'm willing to give up my dividend to fund government, or what do they want to hear?
I think they want to hear whatever your opinion is. I mean, there were a lot of opinions offered, and, you know, there's lots of options as well. From listening to all of the people in the conversation, it appears to me that it's not an either-or answer. I think that there are some people who are trying to paint it as an either-or answer. I'm not sure that's the case. I heard some other more creative answers. So what I would offer is you should call and tell them whatever it is that you think.
Thank you.
Councilman Gleason.
I watched the video when you were talking to Donna, and I enjoyed watching you pin her ears back there. She didn't have a comment for you back, but I enjoyed that. You defended us well.
Thank you. I didn't really realize that video got out. That's fine. I'm fine with it. I just didn't know that.
I'd like to see that.
I know. I thought we're going to be searching.
She's not speaking to me.
Well, and council, I'm going to meet with Barb, school board chairman, and with their finance director, and with Alex Russin, the superintendent, this Friday, just to talk high level the financial situation. I think that's one of the roles as mayor, to kind of act as liaison there, and for council. So, and I'll just mention as well that the not either or. I know some of you had the opportunity to attend. Representative Stutes and Senator Stevens were here hosting a town meeting on Friday, and it sounded like there's a lot of wiggle room where we can have a dividend and funding for services, and it certainly seemed like they supported that approach. So,
And that people should be looking at all revenue streams.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
May I offer one other?
yes, please.
In terms of meeting with the mayor on Friday, it is to discuss our budget. We've had 2 budget workshops and looked deeply at our finances. We have suspended our negotiations with the teachers in light of the volatile economic landscape. They have been willing partners in looking at how to address making sure that the kids have the economic services that they need. And we're in agreement that we will wait until fall to complete our negotiations, which we very much appreciate, but that really is how dire it is.
Thank you. Thank you. We don't have a student council report tonight. I'm guessing award ceremony may have an influence on that. So approval of the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Roll call. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Ken Jones,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Jeff Guard is absent, Tom Baylor.
Yes.
Consent calendar is approved.
Move to approve the minutes of 4/13/19 council public hearing and 4/13/19 regular council meeting.
Second.
Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. We don't have bids to consider for tonight. Reports of officers. Mayor's report. I didn't put a written mayor's report in this packet. I have been quite busy, and frankly, I didn't even really prepare a verbal report. I will say I've been in fairly close touch with our lobbyist, Bitney, on an almost daily basis as threats mostly arise in the legislature. There haven't been a lot of great opportunities, and have also been working on some correspondence. Right now, the Prince William Sound Science Center director, Katrina, is in Juneau. She requested a letter of support from the city, and so I drafted that letter and gave it to her so she could use it on the ground there, and basically just incorporated actions or statements that council's already made. Our resolution of support, selling the land to them, and basically what she was getting is it on your council capital improvements list, and if not, why not? And so so that letter kind of helps clarify that we do have capital. I mean, I didn't get into the details, but at least it showed support. So that may be one item for council to consider as we review our capital projects list periodically. And so I did have a chance to meet with our delegation briefly in Washington, D.C., Senator Sullivan, and then Representative Young's staff and also Senator Murkowski's chief of staff, and basically reiterated our waterfront improvement priority and harbor renovations. And Senator Sullivan in particular is in a really good position to help support waterfront development. There are a couple of large bills, infrastructure bills coming up that will have funding. We've had a couple of bills over the last 2 or 3 years. We really haven't prepared or kind of, I'll say, moved forward with our, we have our comprehensive planning in progress, and that's a great step. But we really kind of need to get our plan and needs put together to start pushing for that. But he's ready there to help us when we're ready to move forward. So is there any questions? Or I know there's some items I haven't touched on if you have any questions. So, okay, I'll try to get a little more. Councilman Jones.
Did you invite Senator Sullivan to come to Cordova and take a look at our infrastructure and come have a Copper River King salmon dinner at the start of the season? I know Senator Murkowski likes to come here often, but I have yet to see him come here.
So I have, he has been in and out of Cordova a couple of times, and he hasn't really had a chance to meet with the council. So we are inviting him to the ribbon cutting. That's just kind of a great event that coincides with Copper River Nouveau. So we'll see if he can't fit that into his schedule, and maybe I should extend that invitation to come sometime this summer when he can meet with council and specifically look at the opportunities and challenges here. That's a great idea. So the short answer is no, but yeah. Okay, that's all I have. I'll try to weave a little more comprehensive report for the next meeting. And I don't have any travel planned through June, so have a little consistency here going forward. Manager's report.
In terms of a document really highlighting our plan, I think there's really 2 opportunities coming forward for us, which we've already started. One is the build grant, and the other one is the Tier 1 grant.
Yeah.
And I think between those documents, we can put together a really good document that will state what our needs are, you know, like we did in the federal request for assistance, have alternatives. And so that'll be good. I was just thinking of that as you were talking.
That's right.
Well, pardon the interruption. Those are both great revenue sources. Has the city or the city staff or anybody considered going after an Army Corps of Engineers grant? I know that's a more labor-intensive process, but I mean, that's how Valdez got theirs. It took them 20 years, but
Yeah, I don't think that's been in our queue as a single item grant, unless Leif knows something different than I do, but at least in my time here, but that's a good suggestion. And I know when we were talking about the federal assistance way back, when we had the Harbor Commission and us and representatives, we were talking about the $72 million option, and the Army Corps was one of those considerations in it. So
I'm just thinking out loud. I'm going to park this maybe and bring it up during a pending agenda because it is our #1 capital priority, and maybe it merits a workshop here to where we can really focus on it, because we had talked about, you know, strategically we've talked about it. We've also talked about, well, I'll just hold that until pending agenda. So.
And again, I worked quite diligently with other staff on Stevens and Stute's visit here, and that was very productive. Mayor, thank you for taking them back to the airport. Appreciate that very much. For Mr. Baylor, I am putting together various investment firm options in terms of their anticipated returns and so forth, comparatively speaking, and been reaching out to some other managers in Alaska and what they do and what their returns are and anticipated. So I'll have that collected for you. I have not forgotten that, so we'll have it going forward.
And a clear understanding of how they're being paid.
Yeah, yeah, fees and so forth going with it. And then as a reminder, on my email, I will be out of town from the 26th of April to the 6th of May.
Those were the dates in the email, right?
Yes. And I'll send a reminder next week with the dates and my telephone number and so forth so that you have that. You should have a file full of those now, except for the new ones. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Really beginning sometime after May 6th, we probably need to start having some budget conversations. I anticipate that going forward, 19 was an adjustment year for us. Going forward in 20, that you will see our budget is going to be reduced from the level it is this year. I'm anticipating there'll be more like I forget what year it was, 2018 budget, 2017 budget, where it was $10.294 million compared to 11 this year. So just as we're thinking about it, that's my anticipation. I don't know where all of this legislative stuff sorts out, but that's what I'm anticipating.
Questions, Councilman Clayson?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, have you talked to Casey Campbell about PISWAC's group? Because our investment guy's pretty good.
I don't know what their name is.
I don't either, but I know they're good.
I'll
Give them a call.
I'll send him an email.
one?
I think so.
No, we switched.
Oh,
Or did you?
yeah, we switched after the.
Oh.
Okay. Other questions, council? Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, how are we coming along on the CFO replacement? Have we got any options out there yet?
You mean for CCMC?
No, for us, for Dean.
Dean.
I call it CFO.
Yeah.
Finance director, in the last go-around, we received 5 applications. After reviewing those applications, I didn't feel that any of those applications met my expectation of what that position is. We also need to have, in conjunction to that, we need to have some conversations about organizational issues here going forward in concert with budget issues. I do have a plan B in mind, so all is not lost, but I need to talk to you about some organizational issues. Quite frankly, I was disappointed with the applications. And I still have a couple of contacts. People have talked to me about the position. I don't know what their resumes look like, but we just keep working at it.
Okay. All right, well, we have a talk with you later. I read through the application, and I'm leaning towards it. Is there a possibility maybe we can get somebody local with some accounting degree and spend some time and effort to train them up to the position, and we get somebody local? But
Well, I think that's part of the conversation that we need to go through, because it's not just an accountant and it's not just the finance director. My goal at the end, if you agree, is something bigger than that, and I think it's going to require perhaps a different kind of person.
Other questions, council? I think I'm going to move the clerk's report towards the end of the agenda if there's no objection, because I think Susan's going to come back when she's done with the award ceremony. We have the staff quarterly reports in the packet as submitted, and correspondence in the packet as noted. And Susan has been emailing the correspondences to council as they come in, and then she just puts them in the next packet if they don't meet the deadline, so that they're public. So we have ordinances and resolutions.
question.
Oh, yes, Councilman Baylor.
I saw at the last minute, there was a letter from the Collinses in regards to the road, and it didn't get into the packet. I'm assuming that'll be in our next
Yeah,
packet?
that will be in the next packet.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And I kind of wanted to just make a comment about the staff quarterly reports real quick.
Yes.
The Parks and Recs one, I appreciated it kind of on one page to look at and be able to go through. And I also really appreciated the finance director's report, having a summary at the beginning that was really clear and understanding, and compared the year of where we're at for this quarter and just wanted to acknowledge that it was easier to read and appreciated it.
Yeah, I would concur with that, too.
Yeah. It's hard to manage what you don't measure.
No.
So any other comments on the staff reports or the correspondence? Okay, thank you. Ordinances and resolutions. First item is substitute ordinance 1174, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, enacting Cordova Municipal Code, Chapter 5.41, raw fish tax, the implementation of a voter-approved 0.5% tax on the value of raw fish landed in the City of Cordova. Second reading.
Mayor, move to approve substitute ordinance 1174, as stated in the packet.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Baylor, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think we hit it pretty good. I think the only issue that I brought up was maybe possibility for small processors to pay a flat fee, but that got voted down. I would be curious on Councilman Jones's opinion of that, since he's in the fishery. Other than that, I support the as written.
Okay, further discussion? Vice Mayor Meyer.
So when this one came up the first time, I had a few questions about it, and I sat down with the attorney before the meeting to get my head wrapped around how this was drafted, because in my mind, I had envisioned something more like the state's business fishery tax or a processor tax, something that wasn't on the fishermen. And I understand that this one is written where it's the processor's responsibility to collect that tax and to administrate it. So it's kind of a background way, I guess, or a back way of putting it on the processors, not necessarily on the fishermen. But my main concern with this one is it's going to be on every fish ticket or check that a fisherman gets. It's going to have that local tax listed there. And personally, I'd rather see it more on the business side as a business expense that doesn't get printed on each one. So I started going down a rabbit hole a little bit of looking into the state business tax, how that works, what forms that they fill out, because something that I kind of heard over and over again is that it's a really complicated tax. Form didn't seem that complicated. Reading the ordinances didn't seem too complicated. It was 10 pages, but and then I started seeing if other communities do something besides a tax like this. The one that we have written, it looked like most communities and boroughs have it written in this way. I did find one community, Chignik, that has a processing tax and a landing tax. And I personally would like to get this right the first time rather than the second, or having to redo it, because I think that it's a lot harder to redo a tax code or a chapter in our code that we've done before. So I don't have anything written up of how I want it done. I wish that I maybe could have put more time on it over the weekend, but I've just been really busy. So yesterday and today was kind of the only time that I could put aside for this, but I'd be more in favor of it being more of a processing tax than a sales tax on it. And we have the same law firm as this community, so I think it wouldn't be hard for our, maybe just to put it back to staff to get a little bit more information from the attorney of the pros and cons between a processing tax / landing tax or the sales tax. I mean, that's basically what ours is like a sales tax, I think, what she has it listed under. Instead, she crossed off landing, and raw fish tax sold in City of Cordova looks like the one that we have, but I'd rather it be more of a raw fish processing tax or something in that line. So I've been kind of struggling with wrapping my head about really supporting this one, because I do support having a raw fish tax and it being dedicated toward the harbor. Money needs to be put in there, but I've been kind of going back and forth in my head about it.
Okay, so do you intend to vote against this one, or you don't have an amendment or anything at this time?
I'm open to allowing the discussion to unfold for me to down to the crunch wire, and I need to make a decision, but I've been really wrestling with how I'm going to vote tonight.
Okay. Further discussion? Councilman Jones.
Well, I guess I'm actually on the same page as Vice Mayor Meyer here. I don't like how this is written as a sales tax. I thought what the voters voted on was a landing tax, but maybe I read the ballot wrong. And so I wish I would have come a little more prepared on this amended one. I read the original ordinance and then went out on a boat for the last few days and didn't see this. So, yeah, I'm not really in favor of the sales tax. I thought it was going to be a raw fish landing tax.
Councilman Meyer. Councilman Schaefer.
I guess functionally, I don't know I don't know enough about the processing tax versus or landing tax versus how it's drafted functionally to know how it would make a difference. Because this, to me, functionally I don't know, but it's seeming like it was directed so that it's the onus of the processor to collect and then remit the tax, which was, I think, the goal. And I think that's good. And I just think it gets tricky with the direct marketers is where it gets tricky and kind of comes down on the fishermen, but that's part of their business, so.
Okay, Councilman Ellison,
Yeah,
and then Jones.
yeah, I think with the attorney put it on sales was because we were discussing that direct marketing thing. It is a landing tax, and it's how the wording is there maybe got messed up. I don't know. I have to look at that again, but I think that it should be on the fishermen, the users of the harbor, to pay that fee, not the 5 or 6 processors that we have in town to raise their costs. It's, the part of the whole goal is to spread the cost out amongst the greatest area that we possibly can. And there's a lot of people that use that harbor that pay a $65 fee and a $150 trailer fee and get to use the harbor and all of its amenities for next to nothing for the whole year. And this gets them involved in that. So I don't have a problem putting it on the fishermen. Ultimately, if the processors have to pay a half a cent less, they're going to pay the fishermen a half a cent less. Anyway, if it was on them. So anyway, I think it's appropriate to charge the individual fishermen. That's what our ballot measure said was going to happen, and it passed overwhelmingly. So I think that's a good thing. Maybe we need to look a little closer at the sales thing. I think in her summary she said sales tax, but it is a landing tax to the fisherman or to the catcher, so to speak. So anyway, my thoughts.
Councilman Jones.
Well, one other problem I have with this is under section 5.41.020, levy of tax. There's levy to raw fish sales tax of 0.5% on the sale of raw fish transferred, sold, or otherwise conveyed within the boundaries of the city. Raw fish delivered outside the boundaries of the city shall be taxable if the sales are contracted for or agreed to be made within the city. When I sell fish to a processor, it's delivered in Unaquik to a tender. They buy it at that point. That's the point of sale. That's not within the boundaries of the city. Same thing on the flats. The boundaries of the city only extend to Whiteshed, Hartney Bay. They go out to the airport and they go out to Shepherd Point. So I'm not exactly sure because I never had a contract or anything like that with a processor. I'm not exactly sure how this could be enforced as a sales tax, when I can just deliver my fish at Salmo Point and sell it at that point. Even with my direct market stuff, I'm not selling it. You know, if I sell it at the dock, is it taxed? Or if somebody meets me out with a skiff at Salmo Point and I sell it there, then it's out of the boundaries of the city. I think it would be better if it was a landing tax. It's fish coming across the dock. Any fish delivered in the sound of that processor, whether it's sold by a Cordova boat or not, if it comes over the dock here in Cordova, it'd be taxed. That's what a landing tax is. A sales tax is like if you go to the store and you buy something. So that's where I see it being the biggest difference and being kind of difficult to
So I think
enforce.
I'm starting to get a sense that this may not pass on this reading, so we need to kind of collect these points, I guess. So one is a sales issue. One is, you made a lot of comments, Melina, but do you have a summary? Sounds like administrative burden was part of it, but.
Yeah, I'm more in favor of a raw fish processing tax, but I am also agreeing about a landing tax. The one community that I'm speaking about, they have a landing and a processing tax, and we're just talking about one. So I would support. I feel like I just need more time to really straighten it out of my head about which one is better. And yeah, I don't really have a summary. I just, like I said, went down a rabbit hole and now.
I guess one other point Councilman Baylor brought up was a flat fee for smaller operations. I'm not sure exactly what he had in mind, but I would be interested in looking at something like that, as far as maybe for direct marketer size businesses, not necessarily for land-based processors who are buying tens of thousands of pounds, but for somebody who's only bringing in 2,000 to 3,000 pounds an opener, selling them to lower 48 via Alaska Air Cargo sales, 1 or 2 fish per person, instead of having to do a percentage on all their sales, just do $250 a year or something.
I'm just going to comment because I had this, some of the larger processors, a couple of them actually mentioned, one of the things that one of the reasons they're not, somewhat acceptive of a new tax is the conflicts in the limited resources for, especially the cranes for unloading fish, and how the small processors, they pay for them, but they tend to use those a lot. And they were hoping that some of where these funds would go would help with some of the congestion and some of the issues. So I just wanted to make that comment, so.
Right, no, I was mainly more talking about the single boat operations, not the actual small processors that you might be thinking of. I'm thinking of people who might not even use the cranes, they're just bringing 10 king salmon out to the airport via dock cart, up to their pickup truck.
Okay, so you're talking about direct marketers that were
Yeah, mainly like
in this draft.
Yeah, like the single boat operator type businesses.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, to do that legally though, don't they have to have a buyer's permit and
They have to have a direct marketer's license.
Yeah, and they have to pay the raw fish tax or the landing tax at March 31st, and that's why we discussed having this done once a year. They have to do that anyway.
There are some though that are exempt from that, the state, like the catcher seller permits are exempt from the state raw fish tax. That's the one that I have.
Yeah, so administratively, I think this has been kind of crafted to be low overheads, but I just, we're on the verge of our fishing season, so I just trying to figure out a path if this doesn't pass.
As I recall, the language was adjusted to prevent a legal challenge based upon the wording. And so you might see the sales tax number, but always was intended to be a landing tax. So I'm going to suggest that, given the uncertainty of that language, without backtracking too far and the cost of backtracking too far, I agree with Vice Mayor Meyer about getting it right, but I didn't anticipate this conversation, or I would have had Holly on the phone to answer this evening or to clarify. But at some point, we've got to get clarified and maybe the procedure is refer back to staff for the next meeting, if that's what you desire, so that we can clarify that language.
Council, would it be helpful to have Holly on the phone to answer some of these questions, or would it influence the way you vote? Because we could table this to later in the meeting and I could text her and see if she could call in.
I would prefer it be moved to the next meeting and then have her on the phone. The next meeting would be May 1st. And that would be the second reading, as long as there's not any significant changes.
I think we should get her on the phone tonight. Because we know we have to wait 30 days after the second reading before we can implement it.
Do a special meeting.
What's that?
You do a special meeting too.
You know what? Can I,
Councilman Baylor?
you guys, I'm gonna say you guys, council put this on for people to vote on. And we're on our last reading and we're talking about as and wills and this wording, come on. You're fishermen. If you've got a stake in this, you guys should have been on top of this. So let's get the lawyer on the phone and let's get it clarified and let's get this thing either fail or pass. I mean, I tell you what, if this had been on building, I'd have been all over this. I'd have been in from day one. I'm not understanding this. This is not the way to do business. So I would say let's get her on the phone, if possible.
I'm calling her right now.
Okay. I'd consider a motion to maybe table this to the end of the ordinance and resolutions agendas anyway.
So move.
Second.
Is there any opposed? Okay, we'll just table this until we can get the attorney available. So the next item is the Resolution 04-19-17, a joint resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, and the Cordova School District Board of Education, opposing Governor Dunleavy's fiscal year 2020 budget proposal.
I move to approve joint resolution, or resolution 04-19-17.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Schaefer, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure, yeah, I think it's a well-crafted message, and the more voices that are behind it, the stronger the message is. I think it's a fair assessment of the situation, and yeah, I think we should express just what the budget could mean for the town and for our community and for our education, and I'm happy to support the resolution.
Okay. Councilman Baylor?
No, thanks for the authors of this. This is very good. I support it.
Further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is Resolution 04-19-18, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing amendment to fiscal year 19 budget in the amount of $398,075 to account for the CIP carry forward projects and grant funding. And we may want a little manager's feedback there.
This is not new money. This is carryover money from previous appropriations that need to be carried over and authorized for expenditure in this year's budget. So this is not new money. It's already been appropriated. It's already been grants. It's just carrying forward, but it has to be inserted into our budget. This is an accounting procedure that Dean has specified for us. That's why you see this resolution.
I move to approve resolution 04-19-18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Schaefer, would you like to speak to your motion?
Nope.
Okay, any further discussion? Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, I'm vote no on this just because of the comprehensive plan. I was never in favor of spending that amount of money. And part of the hiring process is we were kind of guaranteed that could have been done in-house. So I just can't support it. I know it'll pass, but I'm just voting no on it.
Okay, I think, so CIP is construction in progress or capital improvements projects or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Capital improvement projects.
Okay, so it's not comprehensive plan. What, and Alan, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. If we have a $3 million 5-year water plant improvement project, the money's allocated, it's available in an account, but the council has their whole budget, and the $500,000 that was going to be spent for that project in the year is left out of the budget, then that doesn't carry through the budget with the rest of the projects. And it sounds like a whole bunch of capital projects like that have had negative or positive balances kind of left out of the annual budget that doesn't really give you clearer financials. Is that
Correct.
okay?
And that's what this is intended to do, to clear up all of those grants. Got a grant for $50 last year. We spent 30. The $20 carries forward, but it wasn't characterized in the 401s as cash carrying forward. But this is just cash that is unexpended, that has already been appropriated.
So, and this is the thing with accounting. If you don't have that $20 in the bank and have that accounted for there, then your accounts start getting fuzzy. So.
And it's a methodology thing. Our previous finance director may have done it differently. When I prepared the budget last year, obviously Dean has asked to do something different, and this is what he's had us do.
Okay. Further discussion, council? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion carries. Next item is Resolution 04-19-19, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, approving the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Cordova and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union Number 1547.
Move to approve resolution 04-19-19, collective bargaining agreement as written.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Baylor, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'll let the manager speak to it.
Okay, any other council discussion? Manager Lanning?
The previous year, and for many years, the collective bargaining agreement ran mid-year to mid-year. So we were trying to budget in two separate fiscal years for us to meet the needs of a collective bargaining agreement. Last year, as part of the previous agreement, they received a 2% increase, which ran through this year. In this collective bargaining agreement, we have abbreviated the time frame to 2.5 years, this agreement ending in 2021, to get us on the same fiscal year process. This agreement provides for 2% in May, another 2% in January, and 2% the following January in terms of the financial contribution. We held the line on a number of items. Many of these items in here are cleanup items from previous years. The other item that was agreed upon was really a slight increase in the accrual rate of annual leave, which of course on the lower end really doesn't affect us as much on the higher end, but overall it's a day or a day and a half, 2 days per 5-year period. We also increased the rate of accrual by a year or so. So there are obviously some concessions. I can say that, their first request was a 5% salary increase just for this year. So I think we did well in this, and obviously it does have some financial impact, but the next financial impact will be determined in, the 2% was already budgeted in this budget for the May, and then future ones will be budgeted in the following budgets.
Further discussion, council? Councilman Allison?
I guess I just had a question. You didn't include the appendix that had the step levels, but on page 42 of our packet, 10 of the contract, Those step increases are, for the first, for level 2, it's only a year, but by the time you get to level 7, it's 3 years ahead of the other schedule. And I don't have it to compare what that scale is. And just looking at this, it looks like we're given quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think the goal for everyone included was to get to, here's what's happened in the past. We've taken particular staff members and hired them at level 2, and then they were receiving merit and step increases out of sequence with the CBA schedule, but within the latitude of the city manager to approve. As an example, we have many staff members who are at the top. We have a number that are at the top already, and many that are in this 108, 132 month category, but they've been at the top of their scale since 60 months because of the way they were granted.
With this one, everybody's going to be at the top of their scale in 7 years.
Right.
Everybody.
Well, I don't know what to say except for, they wanted an even more aggressive schedule than that, and we cut that in half of what they were requesting for, trying to reach a reasonable place. But we intend to stay on schedule. And so I guess this is viewed as, rather than giving salary increases and benefits in other ways, we're trying to reward people for staying here for a certain period of time and increasing their ability to move up.
So in their 9th year, you just let them complain?
Yep.
8th year, you just let them complain? And
Well, even in their 9th year, when we give salary adjustments in their wage scale at the top, it still moves a little bit because of the 2% increase. So that's just the way it's going to be, and everybody's going to have to stick to the schedule. I've not granted a merit step increase since I've been here. 2016. And so I've been a little tougher on it.
I do have the schedule, Ellen, if you want to look at it. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all right. Well, it's just, it's part of the cost of doing business, and I don't know how to.
well, what I see happening is after 8 years, we're going to be right back here, and they're going to be whining that they're not getting my step, and this new guy just got a 10% step, and I didn't get mine, and I'm going to complain about it. Just what I see happening.
Yeah, I agree. There's always a danger of people doing that. I don't know how to fully prevent it, except not having a collective bargaining agreement, and we can't go that route.
Yeah, I guess I just wouldn't have been, cut 30% off of all of these times.
Yeah, I that's your prerogative, but I think we held the line in other places to make this less of a cost to us. I'm trying to view it in the totality of what it costs us, and I think for the first time when I sat down and bargained with them, I had a financial cost of every one of their requests calculated for them. I'd have to go back to my notes, but surprisingly, these schedules don't really cost us that much money in terms of the actual dollar cost. And so I calculated every one of those out over the period of employment by somebody and tried to stay within a framework that I thought we were going to be able to sustain financially for years to come. And that was a dollar amount. And so as I moved it around, I tried to stay within that dollar amount.
I did have one question about the premium co-payments.
Yes.
It looked like they went down quite a bit from what the employees contribute.
Right, it's a calculation. The first number was calculated, the city's contribution, and what we did is we crossed that out, and now it's what the staff member is paying. But the cost hasn't changed for us. We've held the line on that contribution and our premiums for the last 5 years. So they just wanted it displayed differently.
Yeah, I see that now that it was crossed out of the city and that's an employee. My question was, does it affect our budget of what we budgeted for?
No.
So, no.
No, it doesn't affect our budget. As I said, we've held the line on premiums for 5 years, and their contribution remains the same.
Okay.
So it's still an 85-15 split. We're paying 85% of their premiums, they're paying 15 in every category, whether it's single, employee, spouse, family coverage, and so that hasn't changed.
Okay.
Councilman Baylor, then Schaefer.
Go ahead.
All right, sure. I was just saying, do you have an approximate ballpark estimate of what the financial difference between the current agreement and the new one with the current staff?
You know, I don't have my notes in front of me, and I'd hate to hazard a guess because I had so many numbers running around in my head. Now, of course, the steps are only for those people who stay and get through the system. You know, accruals are the same way. I don't remember a number, do you?
You mean like for what it's gonna cost?
What was the total impact of all of these changes?
You mean like the 2% for the whole year? I don't really think it's really that much, $40,000 for the whole year.
Yeah. In terms of the financial impact of the 2%, the accrued benefits over a time period have a cost to them. I just don't have that number in front of me, and I apologize for that.
Councilman Baylor.
All right, well, I'm going to support this, but I do have a comment, and it goes back to when I was on council earlier. You know, my philosophy is, are we down to the necessary people that we need? We had assistants here and extra people there. Have we reached that level? And if we have, I think those people need to be paid a good salary, taken care of, be trained, and just as important, be held accountable. If they're not doing their job, then we need to move on from them. So I'm going to support this with all of that in mind, but I do think we need to have these employees making a good livable wage and want to stay here, and it helps when we have long-term employees. So I will support this, but heavy on the accountability.
Other comments? Okay, no further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. I haven't heard back from Holly either, so I'm just going to keep that tabled and go through our order of business, and then we'll decide what to do
I haven't heard from you.
down the agenda. So unfinished business is council action on a proposed lots 3 and 4, block 6, original town site. And as I mentioned earlier, I didn't see a conflict of interest from any councilman voting on this. So unless there's no, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I move to approve the proposal from Cordova Telephone Cooperative for lots 3 and 4, block 6, original town site.
Second.
Have a motion and a second from Vice Mayor Meyer. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Allison?
Yeah, same thing I said last time. It's a good proposal from a good corporate citizen that's got the resources to do what they say they're gonna do and gets that out of the city's liability, so I support it.
Vice Mayor Meyer?
I would, I agree with everything that Councilmember Allison said, and I think it was a good proposal. It's nice and had some good information on it, and I like to see Main Street getting a building fixed up that has been needing some work for a very, very long time. So I will support this.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. New and miscellaneous business, council action on recommendations to AMCO regarding their liquor license renewals, page 82 of your packet, for Tiny Wings doing business as Anchor Bar and Grill and Anchor Liquor Store.
Is there a recommendation or a motion anywhere? If not, I would move that we approve the liquor license for renewal for Tiny Wings doing business as Anchor Bar and Grill and Anchorage Liquor Store.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Now, I see no reason not to approve it.
Okay. Councilman Schaefer.
I'd like, maybe amend the motion to include the staff recommendation that we waive the right to protest the approval, but also recommend the renewal with the condition that they pay the delinquent sales tax.
Is that a proposed amendment?
That's page 83. I think it's, I mean, I think to offer it as an amendment. So yes to protest, or waive our right to protest, but on the condition that they pay delinquent sales tax and maybe set up a payment plan with them, or I'm not sure if July 1st needs to be the date or another date, but waive the right for now.
So the amendment is to do.
To add the
a
recommendation,
second one.
yeah. The condition.
Okay, I think this was the recommended motion Councilman Baylor was looking for there.
Yeah, and I would include that in my motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I
So
found it after. You know,
That's
when he's
that's
trying to-
okay. A second.
Or the city will protest the renewal if they don't pay the sales tax. Right?
So just for clarification, the motion before council is to waive council's right to protest the approval of the renewal of liquor license number 62 Anchor Liquor Store for Tiny Wings Incorporated, and recommend renewal of liquor license number 61 with the condition that Tiny Wings doing business as Anchor Bar and Grill pays all delinquent sales taxes owing by July 1st, 2019, while remaining current on new sales incurred, or the city will protest the renewal with AMCO at that time. Okay. Further discussion? Councilman Schaefer.
I guess, I don't know how they've been doing in paying back their taxes. It sounds like it's been maybe an issue for a while, so I don't know how realistic the July 1st date is for becoming square with the city, so.
Okay, so we have to be careful here because I'm not sure that, well, it's okay. I just think sales tax payment status, is that confidential for business?
I don't know the answer to that,
I
but
believe it is, but there's
I would
probably
say-
a reason this is in here.
I would say that Dean has prepared the adequate plan going forward,
Okay,
and that's why that's in here.
got it, okay.
Okay.
Then I'm
They
comfortable
publish it in
with
the
doing-
paper if you're delinquent on your taxes, so.
On your property tax, yeah. Is that,
Sales
And
tax,
sales
sales
tax too?
tax.
Okay,
not the
yeah.
amount, but that you're delinquent.
Yeah, it's the amount. That's what I just didn't want to wander off into foreign territory. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Then I'm comfortable with the date. I
Okay.
just don't want to rush a date that isn't realistic.
Gotcha. Further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thanks for finding that.
Yeah.
Took a while.
So pending agenda, one item I wanted to mention was the maybe a workshop on workshop or a special meeting, I guess, council's prerogative on our waterfront development, our our top capital priority. So we have the harbor itself, harbor renovation, which is the bond that was passed and so forth. But I would just suggest that because it seems like we picking at pieces of that at times. And over the last few years, I know it might be a way to get an update on the status of Tiger and Build grants, but also there have been discussion over the last 3 or 4 years that look at securing a lobbying firm like Gilman Associates, or there's others out there that typically a community that's doing a major infrastructure project, they usually get resources on the federal side in place to help facilitate funding and design and so forth. And Councilman Gleason.
I was going to say, I would like, I talked to Rich Collins specifically about what he wrote in his letter, so that when you're heading out White Shed, about 3 Mile, everybody knows that corner where the guardrail's gonna fall down into the bay there, and he would like us to, I don't know if we make a resolution or what we do to prompt the state or encourage them to come and cut that hillside back, which would be extensive, but it's got to be done. It's a scary corner, you know, you're always leaning to that inside lane, and if you meet somebody, it's a blind corner both ways, so I think it's a big deal. So I don't know.
I agree.
That on the agenda.
Okay.
And at the very least, until then, putting up some signs saying 1 lane ahead or 1.5 lanes ahead, slow down so that you know it's coming up. I think he mentioned that something had been put out there for a minute and then it was taken down again. So if we could get them to move on it right away.
Councilman Baylor.
I don't know if you understand the issues. If you do, would it be appropriate for maybe you even have a letter, you know, that council could support, so we could just kind of move that to the next meeting?
Sure. I can do a little footwork there, working on DOT with 2 or 3 projects in Cordova now and get some staff input on it, so.
I do know that when they, for the meeting, when they talked about this widening of this first section, it just boiled down to safety issues is what gets everybody's attention, so I think that would help.
Okay, so I think the managers heard the discussion here, so. Other pending agenda items? I don't know if council wanted to, it was just a suggestion to have a workshop on waterfront stuff, but we don't have to.
No, I definitely would be in favor of that.
I'll just put it on the pending agenda as an item, and then if we're not prepared to schedule one tonight.
Would it be appropriate to have that be a joint work session with the Harbor Commission?
That might not be a bad idea. I mean, what does council think?
I like that.
Me too.
Okay, that's a good idea. That hasn't happened in a long time, I think.
I don't
And
think we've
it's-
had a joint session.
I don't know if
with
we've ever had.
council.
Yeah, okay. See, oh. I'll get with Tony. We could maybe work it either way. Does council have any preferences to try to do it around a council meeting or maybe just conduct it on a harbor? When does the Harbor Commission meet, Tony? About once a quarter? Second Wednesdays are open for council. We're just, council's just discussing having a joint workshop with work session to talk about waterfront renovations. Would that work for council, just to have it on a second Wednesday at their regular Harbor Commission time?
As long as it's before May 15th.
I'm seeing some nods. We're,
I mean, I could email the commission members and see if they wanted to meet on council night too. Changed our hour to starting at 6, so a work session at 6 or something at a council meeting.
okay, we'll shoot for one or the other of those and see if we can't, I don't have the agenda in front of me for, we have Holly on the line, so Leif, I wrote a little note, I was gonna ask you the call-in number.
Yeah, does she have it?
Holly, do you have the call-in number? Holly, can you hear me? Do you have the call-in number?
We take a 5-minute recess while we get this arranged?
Yeah, so on the pending agenda, can we, do you want to just tentatively scratch in 6 o'clock on the first, May 1st, which would be the first regular council meeting in May? Okay,
Hey, I'm gonna get the.
Yeah, because I'm going pot fishing on the 7th and I won't be back until.
okay.
like, right
So
before
6
the first
PM,
one.
May 1st, a joint council Harbor Commission work
I
session.
can give you the call.
Is there any other pending agenda items?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, seeing none, we're just setting up a call with Holly, so I'll go ahead and just call a 5-minute recess, and then we'll revert to that action item 14, ordinance 1174.
So our guys are Bank of
Okay,
America.
how about I email it to you? Does that work?
Oh, cool. Yeah. And
I will forward this.
I couldn't remember her name. Remember that, hey, Kenny, remember that gal that was on Kiswak for a while?
Okay, 1-877-820-7676. And conference ID number is 22233.
So that's how that started for us.
Well, and it's, a lot of
Okay,
it's
I still have to
council
dial
rule, and
in,
we do
so
have
it'll
some
be a couple seconds.
restrictions in code.
Okay, bye.
But
Bye.
how you can invest city funds, but I just. Yeah. Uh-oh, this looks like Susan.
Just don't drop it.
Welcome to Copper Valley Telephone's conferencing service. Please enter your conference. The administrator has not yet arrived. If you are the administrator, please enter
I've got an idea there, Alan. I think that's a good.
The conference administrator has joined the conference.
Say, Cindy?
There are 2 attendees on the conference call.
Holly, is that you?
Yes.
All right, you're connected.
Holly, thank you for calling in. We just took a 5-minute recess, and I'll just round up the councilman here, and we'll be right with you.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready when you guys are.
No.
8:18, are you trying to figure that out?
The bumble.
They gotta have a place too out there.
Yeah, he set up.
It is kind of weird how 1174 is written in the explanation landing, but then tax. And I don't know if she meant fish, raw fish sales as one and then tax.
No, I'm trying to get the actual ballot wording.
Yeah, it's kind of weird difference there. I just know on PISWAC, we've made a few mistakes like that where we had to go back and undo everything because of.
There's gonna be some damage done if he gets down this low.
Yeah, the ballot says on the value of raw fish landed.
Landed, yeah. And that's actually in the, right on the front page of our deal.
That was a big sucker.
I'm sorry, am I supposed to, I cannot hear you guys. Is that because
Okay,
it hasn't
Holly.
started yet?
Yeah, we were just in recess, and we just got back to the table here, so we'll speak into your.
I just wasn't sure if I was missing,
No, thank you very much for calling in. We just, so I'm going to bring ordinance 1174 back off the table for discussion. The council was just discussing the raw fish tax draft ordinance, and we're in our second reading, and there were some questions, and I guess I'll just start the first one, why the term sales tax was used, because it's essentially a landing tax.
Well, and here's the reason, because it's a landing tax applied the way that a city municipality is going to apply it is a sales tax. But when you guys when you got voter approval, you got voter approval to tax fish landed, which is a broader authority, but that authority is limited by more than just your municipal authority to tax. And that's because so that language, a lot of the language we use when we talk about fish taxes comes from the state of Alaska and their taxes. So the landing tax imposed by the state of Alaska is a tax that's in essence imposed on fishery businesses, and the landing tax is designed to get within the jurisdiction of the state of Alaska to get those fish similar to direct marketing, but even more so. So it's those fish that were landed somewhere else, but well, that were landed inside Alaska and sold outside, right? So it's still a sales tax, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to expand sort of and identify the reach. We are not taxing the processors. The processors are simply collecting the sales tax we are imposing on the sellers. And so if we do a landing tax in that way, if we say we're taxing fish where landed, we have a lot more questions about where we're allowed to draw that line. Because the city of Cordova doesn't have, do we draw a line on a certain area? Do we say a certain distance or mile is out from the... Do you see what I'm saying? We start to create, and we have some case law that really supports our ability to go pretty far in that direction. But that case law is from the 70s, and it's one case out of Bristol Bay. And then we have a bunch of other cases in different arenas suggesting that the authority you have under the Constitution to apply a tax to people catching fish, landing fish in quote-unquote Cordova, whatever that means, remember, because what is Cordova's waterways and what is the state of Alaska's waterways, that's a totally different, it's a lot easier to say we're in state of Alaska waters. It's a lot harder to figure out what we get to count as our waters for Cordova. So I'm going to take a breath, but basically that is why. So it's great that you have voter approval, and that question was perfectly formed, but your tax ordinance goes to, it goes as far as I believe it can go without requiring you to really answer hard questions that we don't have answers to. So
Okay.
it's squarely within the law. You can always go further and go to a landing tax and really push that edge. But I think getting the tax implemented, and this really gets at what you were trying to tax, which is not necessarily just what's landed. It's the raw fish tax that's sold within your jurisdiction.
Okay, so
Help or it's hard when I can't see you guys. So
I think
questions?
I think so, yeah. And so I think you've answered another question because council expressed interest in a quote unquote processor tax, and then another councilman actually mentioned a tax on the fishermen. And so what it actually boils down to is a processor tax collected on the resource which the fishermen are catching. So another comment was on section 5.41.020, which I think captures the essence of what you were just explaining, which says there's levied a raw fish tax of 0.5% on the sale price of raw fish transferred, sold, or otherwise conveyed within the boundaries of the city. And then this next line was the question, raw fish delivered outside the boundaries of the city shall be taxable if the sales are contracted for or agreed to be made within the city.
Exactly. So by time that you're exactly right, because what I'm trying to do is push you to well within the law, but just right, but so that you're taxing what the voters approve to the greatest extent possible. And so you do have this sort of direct marketing component where a lot of what they're doing, the nexus of what they're doing and the sale is in Cordova, but the fish is going out and the product may never actually come within the jurisdiction.
Yes.
Even though
so let me give an action
is coming within the jurisdiction, or that so that is an attempt to get as far as we can. But I think one of the things that is really easy to lose sight of is the state of Alaska has a fisheries business tax, and it has 4 different ones, and they apply to different species in different ways and different businesses in different ways. And this is, cities often go for a raw fish tax because it's not taxing, it's not applying that tax in the same way, because you get, so you're not, because there's also some of those taxes you actually get a proportion of.
So
right?
Holly, Holly?
Yes.
You might be over-explaining a little bit, just, I'm trying to break in a couple times, but there were some specific questions, but, and I see some quizzical looks here, and you can't read the body language, so, but I want to grab, you just reminded me of an example that I think might have just brought this home for me, and maybe it will for the council. So, if, for instance, there's a huge catch in Prince William Sound, Trident Seafoods, for example, or one of our local processors contracts to buy all that fish, but because maybe they don't have the processing capacity here, it gets hauled to Kodiak or Ketchikan, which has happened in large volumes in other years. We would still get the taxable revenue from that fish.
Yes. If it was negotiated for, yes, because they're going to negotiate the sale of that fish, the raw fish, and then we don't, and that's exactly, and so all of that's going to happen. And that's all going to be happening in Cordova. And so it goes somewhere else. Now, the one thing that we might find in our tax return, and this is probably over-explaining, but there may be a point where we've got, where they're reporting that they're basically being taxed on the same product in the same amount by two jurisdictions. We've crafted this so that won't happen. If that happens, though, we just deal with it on the case by case. It'll show up in their tax return. But it shouldn't happen. We crafted it so that, because that whole negotiation is happening, you know, so the sale is there. So there's different points of taxation. And when you're taxing a processor, and as for the processing of the fish, you lose all of the tax on the raw fish, and you get tax or a portion of the tax from the state when you are processing fish within your jurisdiction. You get a piece of that tax. So I think most jurisdictions don't want to layer on the tax, because while it does feel to the processors like this is in essence a tax on them because they're paying it, it is not. It is a tax on the seller.
Okay, so, and then the only other question that I had here, and then maybe council can clarify their questions. There's an exemption for this, for the direct marketers, is that right? Because there was also a question about incorporating a flat fee for direct marketers.
There should not, I don't believe there's an exemption for direct marketers.
Okay.
I think there's an exemption for hatcheries and bait.
Okay. Councilman Jones.
So I've got a couple of questions. One would be on the direct marketer side. Direct marketers are selling oftentimes processed product, and this is a tax on raw product. So how do you quantify the value of the product raw? Would you just say, well, the processors were paying this much on the grounds? Even though I sold it for 20 bucks a pound, H&G, I mean, you didn't buy it from yourself for $3 a pound and then H&G it and then sell it for $20 a pound. So do you pay the tax on $20 a pound, or do you pay the tax on $3 a pound?
The tax anticipates that you're only taxing the direct marketer when they're selling that first point of sale. So they negotiate, and it's that first point of sale. If they're processing it themselves, and then so they buy it from somebody, and that person pays the tax, then the tax has been paid on that particular product.
Right, but if it's processed at sea,
so if
it's not coming back to town as a raw fish product. It's coming back to town as a processed at sea H&G product.
But it's the raw fish, the sale price for the raw fish that was negotiated, and that's what it is intended to be.
But they're not.
It's not a tax on the processed final product. It's a tax on the fish sold. Now, if the first point of sale is after, they do it all themselves, and then it's a processed product when they first sell it, and they're the first person to, they catch the fish, they negotiate the sale of the fish, they process the fish themselves, and then the price is directly for them, and that negotiation happens. I think that the only hard part there becomes that if you're taxing them on a processed product, then the price would probably be inflated, and that wasn't the intention, kind of a loophole, but they would simply break out the cost of processing or the cost of the, so we're charging X for this. So we might need to work on that on the return, just for that particular circumstance. And there'll be other circumstances that are unique to a particular entity or group, but we just break it out on the tax form. And I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head, but you would make sure they itemize so that they only pay on the raw fish sale.
Right. So the instance I'm thinking of is, I do 3 different forms of direct marketing. So I do across the dock, whole fish, direct to consumer. I do where you take it to the processor, have them custom process it for you, flash freeze it, and then you sell it online. And then there's also the wholesalers who are H&Ging on board, and they're selling direct to restaurants across the globe, with doing air freight or frozen, taking it out on the ferry. And so the majority of those people are processing at sea, and they're contracting those over the internet. So while they may reside in Cordova, the buyers do not. So it gets really complicated.
Have a hard time. And that doesn't mean, and I say that we really have to look at, I'm always looking for the nexus, the point of sale, and how far, and what that, where we can go constitutionally or where we should go, and making sure. And I don't know the answer to that one. I do think, I just don't know. That one's really fuzzy because they don't have a point of sale. So we didn't, that's why the negotiated with, I don't think that via internet would likely fall within that. But these questions that you're asking, the only way to address them is really on an individual basis. They file their tax returns, they base it on the raw fish tax, or the city looks at someone and says, oh, you know what? He hasn't been filing, or they haven't been filing their tax return, and we think that they should, and then you kind of figure out where those lines are, because they're not clear boundary lines, right? Because of the nature of the industry. So we kind of have to work them out, which I know is not a great answer. The only other way to do it is take direct marketers out of there. Don't tax direct marketers. That's the only other way to do it. So I think, though, that the intention was to tax them. So I leave that to you. But we either have to use the tax form to get itemized and complete information to ensure we're taxing just the raw fish price, or exempt raw fish.
There's another question.
Direct marketers.
Councilman Gleason?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that those guys that process on their boats and sell their fish on the internet, they're generally bringing them here, putting them on Alaska Airlines and shipping them out here, so they will fall under having to tax.
But they won't be, because they're not raw fish anymore. They have been processed. So right here it says that have not been processed. So if they're processed at sea, those fish are no longer raw fish when they come to the dock. They're processed product.
Well, under the definition, though, if you look in the definitions under C, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Holly, what another council observation earlier was that, I think there's some concern here because it's a new tax and the council wants to try and get it right on the front end. But the reality is, and I guess I'd like your feedback on cases where you've seen new taxes implemented. And I guess as an organizational manager, you never get it perfect. I mean, some of these things, there was a comment earlier that, once we put it in place, we can't change it. But the reality is these are fairly fluid, and you kind of have to, issues are going to arise and have to be resolved, right?
Oh, yeah. And you're absolutely going to want to change it. I mean, I don't mean substantively immediately, but you are going to want to change it because policies will change, needs, revenue, resources, all of those things will change, and how you implement. And let's say that there's a change on the state level that drops the proportional payments to municipalities under the state tax. Well, then that might require us to rethink the structure of your fish tax and what should be taxed. And another thing to remember is processing that definition and how that applies in the fish in the state tax is very important, because you have many ports, say like Homer. Homer's got very little processing, right? So it gets sold, it's raw, it gets trucked to Seward, where all the processing plants are. So they lose all that tax. And so those definitions, we did not go that far. Our definitions are not like that because we're not just taxing the processor. You know, we're not trying to tax the fish as processed. So because of that, there's more, it doesn't align the tax. So I think that might be helpful. I know you guys have a really strong understanding of the industry and those taxes, so I don't know if that's helpful or hurtful to, I might be over-explaining again.
Councilman Jones?
So I guess another question I would have on this is, in here, it says has been contracted within the city or agreed to be made within the city. So for instance, you have a fisherman from Homer who sells his fish to Trident, whose headquarters is in Seattle. They don't ever come to Cordova. They don't have a signed contract with Trident. It's just a verbal handshake deal that they made at the boat show in Seattle that they'll fish for them the next year. They go out and they sell all their fish to Trident. It gets processed in Cordova. But was that sale made in Cordova or was it made in Latouche Passage and Valdez Arm and, where the fish was caught and put on the tender?
And I think that that's going to be, we have to analyze that situation. My first instinct is, we look at the words and we have to actually see, where were they on the phone? Because it's processed in Cordova, you're getting that tax on, right? You're getting that portion of the tax on the fish. So the question is, well, was it really just because it was done, it was negotiated in Cordova because one of the parties is in Cordova, but is the direct marketer claiming that a lot of the other communities in Alaska, for example, have raw fish tax, and they apply them to direct marketers. So
Right, I wasn't talking about a direct marketer
about,
in that situation. That wasn't a direct marketer example. That was like a just normal purse seiner who doesn't live in Cordova, but sells fish to a company that processes fish in Cordova who isn't headquartered here. So like, if I was from Homer and I'm calling Rick Isaacson, he has a Seattle number, he has an office in Seattle, he's not here right now. I call him up and say, hey, I'll fish for you this summer. We don't sign a contract. There's no pen on paper. It's just, okay, sounds good. Then you go out and you sell your fish to them wherever you happen to be fishing. It's not outside Cordova because this is closed waters in front of Cordova.
Your check's going to get written out of here, though.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, really, at that one, I'm guessing you're calling the attorney saying, where's the point of sale? We have negotiations where this is happening on the internet. How far do we want to push our 0.05% tax? How far do we want to delve into? Because, and I know this is a frustrating answer, but we're figuring out internet sales tax right now on a national level. We're trying to figure out where we find the nexus, where we find the point of sale, how you balance one jurisdiction with another. And all types of, and that sale really just reflects that world, right? Where it's much more surreal. It doesn't live in any tangible place, and so we follow. So that language mirrors the language that allows us to look at that relationship in determining the point of sale, and we don't know how far that goes yet or how narrow it is because we're watching the cases as they develop. So we had that, that Amazon sales tax case. That's a big one we've been watching.
Yeah.
Well, there's a relationship involved too. The processors have communicated that, the hatchery fish and the annual reporting were important to them. And so the city heard that and incorporated it. So sometimes it's an evolution, but ultimately the tax is allocated for improving the waterfront. So,
and if we can't find a way to do it consistently, we are having there's just too many different ways in which the point of sale shifts, then we'll have to talk about, then at that point you may want to consider increasing a tax and reducing the who it applies to, so you're just going strictly from raw fish that crosses your dock. I mean, that's, but that is not the avenue that most have taken. I think the goal is to keep the taxes as low as possible and spread them around generally, and so that's where we see the language and the provisions we've been mirroring and working with.
Okay, Councilman Jones?
But you're right. I wish I had better answers. I feel like I can't give you a definitive answer on some of these questions.
Councilman Jones?
So I have another example that I have a question on. You've got a fisherman who lives in Cordova who delivers his fish to a processor not located in Cordova and whose headquarters is not in Cordova, has no presence in Cordova whatsoever, but the fisherman lives here, sells those fish. Are those then, is that contract considered made in Cordova because he probably made the phone call from his 424 number over to Silver Bay Seafoods in Valdez, and he's a shareholder? I mean, there's so many different idiosyncrasies to all this. Seems really complicated to me to have the sales, have it be a sales tax. When this was originally pitched to us, it was on the basis of a landing tax, and we were basing our numbers on what we expected to generate based off of the shared fisheries landing tax that the state collects and gives us a portion of. And the total number of fish landed over our docks and processed here, not necessarily sold here. So it's.
But that's the same, because a landing tax is not landed. So that's the same thing. It's the point. So the only thing you eliminate is the original. I mean, I think council wanted to encompass direct marketers. So you can't do that and hit the point of sale on the dock, but you can definitely do that. It's a very easy change. You strike the sentence that says "and negotiated," and that gets rid of all of those issues, because a landing tax is a sales tax for purposes of a municipality and what you're taxing. So you're not putting a tax on the processors. That wasn't the intention, I don't think.
That was what was sold to the voters, in my opinion.
Tax.
So
You get that portion of the, and if that is the intention, I think we should go, then we should change it, because I think then we're mirroring and putting that layered tax back on the processors. So we better, if we're going to do that, that's totally, that's something we can definitely look into, but it changes the whole process, because the landing tax doesn't tell us what type of tax it is, because it's not, there's an excise tax and a sales tax, natural resource tax, natural resource extraction tax. These are the types of taxes. Landing is just used to, if we're in the state sense, to actually get outside of the ports. So that's how they're usually using it. But I understand, you're saying, I thought it was a landing tax. What I'm hearing is, I thought it was a tax on stuff that actually got sold in Cordova, on the port, that got landed here, and landed here because Cordova does not have a waterway, right?
So, Holly?
Landed here means the fish is, brought to our businesses.
So, Holly, just
in Cordova, yes?
so to move this ordinance forward, I guess to have something that the council can vote on, and then Vice Mayor Meyer had a question. Did I hear you say that basically that would just amount to striking this sentence that says raw fish tax delivered outside the boundaries of the city shall be taxable if the sales are contracted for or agreed to be made within the city?
Absolutely, yes, and that's totally fine. Just make sure, what I would do is, if you're going to adopt it with that change, just adopt it to amend the language to strike that and make any other changes necessary to eliminate taxation of those transactions. And then I think we're really close. It should look exactly like the landing tax that you're talking about. It's just, I think, vet me, look at it, make sure you agree, but that's really the difference here.
Okay, well, council can use that language just to strike that clause and any others that you know.
And you can also exempt direct marketers, which we didn't do the first time, but to the extent that there's a worry that direct marketers, without that language, direct marketers will still get taxed at different points than was intended, you can put them, we can draft an exemption for them too, very easily. So that's another one to throw in there to just make sure your intent is captured.
Okay, Vice Mayor Meyer.
I had a question. The state has a landing tax already, is that correct?
Who does?
Does the state have a landing tax? Is it the business
Yes.
tax?
Well, when the state applies the landing tax, so they have a landing tax and they collect it with quarterly payments. It's one of their fisheries business taxes. And I don't want to try to opine too much on all the ins and outs of the tax, but I can do that. If you guys are going to, if you think that it would be helpful to do that, I can be prepared to do that at your.
Well, my question about the state's landing tax, if you know off the top of your head, I'm not sure, but who is taxed in that landing tax scenario with the state?
So the landing tax, what the state applies the landing tax, it's the fisheries business is taxed, but the landing, they have a rule that goes out give me a second because
The 3 mile for,
yes, 3 miles, yes. So it's and I think I have the language somewhere here.
but it's
Those
a
are state
tax on
waters.
whoever's bringing the fish and sea resources from outside of the state's 3 mile boundaries, and its first land contact is in the state of Alaska.
Correct.
I believe. Okay, so the person that is
And
being
it's any
taxed,
processed fishery resources
right?
under
So
the American Fisheries Act, which is how they get there.
So I guess my question to that is, the person that's bringing it into land, they're taxed whether they're bringing in processed goods or they're also being taxed if it's raw fish. So does it matter who pays it if
They
they?
only do, but most of the state's taxes are on processed products. So the tax is levied on any processed fishery resources under the landing tax. And then when they do process, it's regardless of any landing, right? And then the fisheries, the way they look at fishery resources, they're still looking at it being processed. It's just that's where you get the landed in Alaska and then processed outside. And then there's the
Well, I guess my question kind of to that is,
floating processor component too, which I'm pretty sure they get taxed even if they're outside the 3 mile, as long as their purpose is for transshipment. And please don't hold me to this. I mean, but this is my memory from the research I did while we were drafting the ordinance.
well, I guess my real question really is, the landing tax is always a tax on the processors, whether it's processed out at sea or if it's processed at land, right? For the state's landing tax? That was kind of it, I think.
Well, if I sell it for $5 and someone buys it for $5 and then 3% of that's paid, who has really paid that? I mean, the processor is collecting it, but, is a fisherman ultimately paying for it as a processor? I mean.
Right, do they build it into the price?
Exactly.
And there's a weird thing about pollock. Just so I don't want to mislead you. I mean, because pollock.
I think we're getting off the rails, Holly. So is there any?
Regardless of where it's landed and why, I don't know.
Okay, so what I'm trying to drive to, I guess, is there any other questions, council, I guess would influence either how you vote on it or an amendment that you would propose for it?
I'm trying to pull up the ballot that the people voted on right now so I can read the exact
I
wording.
got it on my phone, if you want me to read it. You want to read it, Kenny?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, so the people voted on a 0.5% tax on the value of raw fish landed in the city. People did not vote on a tax of 0.5% of the sale of raw fish. So,
But this is, so landed within the definition, so this is, I think, where you and I are getting, landed is a broader definition under tax law. So when you say landed in the city, clearly a fish isn't, landed usually means caught in the city, right? Like actually caught, taken from the water.
no, landed would mean where it its first point of shore contact is what landed. The definition in the state.
So with the state, their definition of landing is going to be different than yours as far as what because of the jurisdiction of Cordova. What are Cordova waters? What's landed in the city? And so if it's shore contact, like the first time it comes and touches the dock, then that would be, that would be okay, but that's not how it's generally defined by the state. So they're applying landings to outside, and because they have and they're getting at, the landing tax literally is designed to get at fish that is caught.
Yeah.
In Alaska.
Landed on the deck of a boat.
Yes. So, thank you. Exactly. That's and so that's why the goal with this, and it's both a sales tax for a city. If you're taxing that, you need a point to tax it. So Cordova's point to tax is the sale, and that can be. It's really. The landing is the same unless you're looking at that landing on the dock, on the deck of the boat, and then that's more expansive. You could apply the tax farther than even I'd recommend where some municipalities do. They go a lot further.
Okay, Holly, I think we're starting to draft an ordinance live with a committee of 7 councilmen. So I have one other comment here from Councilman Gleason, or question.
No, it's not a question. I was just going to say that we're shooting to tax fish that get into Copper River, Ocean Beauty, and Trident. And I think this gets us there. That's what we're trying to do. And it's on the value that we get paid from those guys. So it's written like that, right? And we can get that from what's written right now.
Yes, and if you want to avoid the gray, take out the direct marketing language, and that gets you back to something that's more pure. You'll lose tax that way, but that's just the other piece. If you want to get to that, we want to make sure we're doing what the voters intended, and if the voters were thinking landing means dock in the, in the port, then that's how you would do that.
Councilman Baylor.
And then I guess also we discussed this at the last meeting. If we pass this, if this thing needs to be tweaked next year or the year after, we have that opportunity to do it. So my feeling is if we move forward to this, we can make changes as necessary. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Holly? Do you have a comment, Alan? So, Holly, thank you very much for calling in. I think you added a lot more clarity than you did confusion. So,
Are you sure?
I think so. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Really appreciate it.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Okay, so there was a motion and a second on the ordinance as worded in the packet. And that's what is currently on the table.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Baylor.
And I guess this is, there's going to be some confusion. We're going to have to work through this in the coming years, but this is exactly why I put the amendments in motion last meeting, was to amend the ordinance to allow, or I should have said, allow staff the leeway or the option to make changes in the language so that small direct marketers would have an option to pay this tax at flat fee instead of percentage of gross. Just for these, if we get so bogged down, at least it gave the staff, just give me $1,000 and go away. We'll figure this out later. But that's why I put the motion up before.
Because the reality is, staff is going to interpret and administer this, and because issues are gonna arise that none of us council could anticipate, so. Councilman Gleason.
I would just say that both Councilman Jones and Meyer made good points, but they're probably not going to come up a ton, you know, and we can address them as all of a sudden we incur the problem. So I agree with you guys, but in an effort to be able to collect tax on Copper River fish, which are pretty high value, we gotta, I think, move forward. That's just my opinion.
Further discussion, Councilman Meyer, Vice Mayor Meyer.
Just to kind of go off those exact comments, that's why I've been kind of going back and forth in my head so much about this. And I know that we can change it. My point about saying it's hard to change it is we get a lot of things on our plate, and changing some code in the language, if it needs to be changed, I think we would make it a priority, but sometimes those things just get put off to the side for a little while. And maybe it's a question for some of the council members that get fish tickets. You know, I learned recently that they're all done electronically now, and they don't have a value on it. So really what you know that you're getting paid for comes from your first check, basically. And on that first check, you have taxes like this one listed.
You have the enhancement tax and the marketing association tax come off.
So my understanding of how ours is written, the local Cordova tax would be just listed along with probably on your check. So I know in a lot of our languages it says fish tickets and other things, so I don't think that's probably a problem right now, but I think that clears it up. And that's one thing that I didn't really like about it, seeing it on there on the checks. I think it makes it a good reason to take it off. I think if it was on the processors to pay it and it didn't list it on there, then it would give fishermen more of a leeway to bargain with the canneries about what they're getting, because then they would be talking.
Okay, Vice
on
Mayor Meyer, I'm going to ask all of council to
Okay.
focus on the motion in front of
Yeah.
you and whether you're going to vote
Sorry.
for it or against it or make an amendment, so
Okay.
we can move this forward. So, okay,
Yeah.
Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I'm not going to vote for it as moved by Councilmember Baylor. I don't like the the sales tax wording. I'd like to see us go after a fisheries landing tax as intended by the voters. I think that this is not what the voters intended and not what they voted on. I think what the intention of the voters was to tax the processors and not the fishermen. That's what we were sold.
Further discussion, Councilman Gleason.
That's what's going to happen. The canneries are going to pay this. They're going to add up everything they paid us, subtract the incentives and whatever they're required to, subtract, and then they're going to write the city a check for 0.5% of that.
No, they're going to deduct this 0.5% from every one of the checks that you get. They're going to add it all up just like Shoreside Petroleum does, and then they're going to send that money to the city. That's how this is written.
That's not how I read it. I mean, it's the canneries are going to pay that tax.
They're going to collect it from the fishermen, and it's going to come on the bottom of your statement from the cannery that you paid 0.5% to Cordova. And it's only going to be on the people who have contracted in our community to sell fish. So is that me, even though I sell my fish to Inlet Fish, or is it other people who sell their fish to Silver Bay but they live here? And then people that live in Homer but sell their fish to Trident and don't pay it? I mean, it's really, I'm not agreeing with his language at all as it's written right now. I think it's way too complicated and convoluted. I thought it was going to be a landing tax on any raw fish product that crossed a dock in Cordova, and that's what we voted on in March.
Councilman Schaefer.
I mean, I think for landing tax, it sounded like it's more processor, but for what's coming across the dock in Cordova, if we remove that line, then that would constrict it to what's coming into town. So I don't know. I don't know if that would make you more comfortable with it. I mean, it's the processors who are collecting the tax from the fishermen, as I understand it, but they're the ones doing the administration. But I mean, it is the fishermen who, everyone's contributing to this harbor fund in some way, you know, with the gas tax, with the increase in harbor fees, and then with this fishing tax. And so there's many different groups of people that are all contributing in different ways. And I think it is fair for the fishermen, who are one of the major users of our harbor, to also be contributing in one of these ways, from my perspective.
Call for the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote, please. That's right, second reading.
Ken Jones,
No.
Jeff Guard is absent. David Gleason,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
No.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Allison.
Yes.
Motion carries. Council, I am going to suggest that we postpone, let me wait till we get there. Audience participation. We scared them off, ran them off. So we'll do council comments and start to my left with Councilman Jones.
No comment.
Councilman Meyer, Vice Mayor Meyer.
I just want to, they're gone now, but CCMC and the school board for all the work that they've been doing. I know that we have a tough position. I know we had a joint session with CCNC earlier. And things are looking a little tough, but it was good to have that joint meeting.
Thank you. Councilman Ellison,
No comment.
Councilman Gleason,
No comment.
Councilman Schaefer,
No comment.
Councilman Baylor.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Okay, there was a lot of deliberation on that, but council, it's, yeah.
I just thought of something. On that fish tax, we exempted the hatcheries, but as we moved and approved that any fish contracted in the city of Cordova, well, it doesn't matter if those fish go to Valdez or Whittier or any of the other processors, PISVAC would pay that fish to us because their headquarters is in Cordova and that contract's made in Cordova.
But they're exempt.
They're exempt.
But we just exempted them now out of worry because the processors thought they were gonna pay it.
It's a good point. And I'm sorry, you didn't have comments, Councilman Baylor. Okay. On the executive session, I'm going to suggest that we postpone this for a couple of reasons. Councilman Guard was the one who primarily asked for it, but I know other councilmen were interested. Also, there was a request for Manager Lanning's last performance evaluation, and I just sent those out to new councilmen this afternoon. It kind of slipped off my radar, so it's the will of council, but just a consideration.
Move to adjourn.
Councilman Ellison.
I guess just a comment on that.
Yep.
I don't want to, just like the clerk's evaluation, you know, we kept putting it off, and pretty soon it was 4 months down the road, and we got a contract expiring here within a couple of months or a few months, I'm not sure when.
October, yeah.
When it was, but anyway, I want to get that wrapped up one way or the other. You know, I'd like to see them stay, but if that's not going to happen, then we need to have a plan.
It will be on May 1st, and I think that's the last one where you'll be gone May 1st. Okay. So, well,
I hope we have an executive, or we have some sessions right after the 6th of May, because we got to get started on the budget and have some philosophical conversations. So we can squeeze something in.
We're going to lose some people. in
Yeah,
fishing
we
season,
are
too.
gonna
We
lose
had
people in fishing, though, so
2 months last year where we didn't have meetings at all.
what's the will of council? We have it on the agenda here, so we would have to remove it by a motion. So I need a motion to go into executive session, I guess.
I mean, does Alan want to talk about it now, or?
I'll talk about it anytime you want.
So if I don't hear a motion, it will
Well,
die.
I would move to go into executive session to discuss with manager's contract. Matters the might tend to prejudice the reputation of an individual, provided that individual might request a public session.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll go into executive session. And then